what a great event this is so far. We've had loads of takeaways coming out of the sessions and the interviews so far, messaging about how to run EO businesses, about being transparent and having a clear structure, clear comms and engagement channels, two-way, not just cascading down, clear messaging, treating people equally, that sort of thing. Big thanks out to Broadway Malyon, the architects firm, to say thank you for helping us with the great session there, a groundbreaking session in gathering and using employee voice and opinion, which of course is a big challenge. It might be slightly feeling like pushing a boulder up a hill when you first get going, but that sounds like a great session. And Baxendale, of course, for their useful one-pager of key steps to administer business with different types of employee ownership structure. And of course, honesty and transparency is a big value of mine. So I have revealed that I had my microphone on mute. I can't blame anyone else. So there we go. Now, the issue we have today, right now, is with the questions bit for the panel, which is what we've got next. And the panel, of course, is a great way to share ideas, and we've got a fantastic lineup of panelists. But we do have a slight hamstring in that we've got no questions box for your questions. Audience questions are brilliant. So we've got a workaround. If you can email, open it up on another browser or use your phone to email Anne Richardson at the Employee Association. So that's Anne with an E, A-N-N-E .Richardson, Anne Richardson at employee ownership, I think you probably know how to spell that, .co.uk. And she's there waiting to take your emails and will get them to me in the same way that she told me I was on mute. So that's great. And I look forward to hearing your questions and putting them to the panel. So, of course, I like to have fun at work. I don't know if you've noticed that, and admit to my mistakes. I'm quite happy in my work, but this is what we're going to hear about right now in the panel. We're going to hear from 3 people who simply want work to be better. For many reasons. For one, they want people to be happier. We know that workplace stress is at an all-time high. Personal anxiety and mental health issues are not going away anytime soon, especially, of course, under the challenging times that the pandemic has thrown at us. And the personal and business cost of that is extremely high. They also want to see better business in operation so people and communities can prosper and the economy can stand tall. And they reckon business could and should be a force for good, benefiting individuals, organisations, and society as a whole. So I'm keen to find out more. The why and the how of all of this. Is it just pie in the sky dreaming, or is it actually possible? And does EO make a difference? Does it help it? Does it promote it? So let's meet the panelists. First of all, and we're going to see them on screen in a minute. Brilliant. Hello, everyone. I just want to press your microphone. We're all microphone unmuted, are we? Just give me a thumbs up.
So.
I think so.
Brilliant. Okay, so first of all, let's meet Peter Cheese, who is the CEO of the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development, and he writes and speaks widely on the development of HR, the future of work, and key issues of leadership, culture, and organisation, people and skills. And he's fascinated by how EO can support individuals in their workplace as part of the CIPD's mission to champion better work and better lives. So please welcome Peter Cheese. And Peter, you've been at the CIPD for over 8 years now, so you've seen a trend or two, haven't you? What pandemic-related outcomes have you found most surprising when it comes to work over the last few months?
Yeah, no, really interesting question, Penny. I think the thing that surprised me is the sort of a paradox in a sense, is that we are now seeing evidence that actually engagement has grown during the pandemic, as has trust. Now, those are 2 really, really important trends, because for many years we've been seeing, at best, engagement plateauing, and indeed trust has been generally falling. So it's a really interesting paradox, Penny, that in a time when we're all having to work in these extraordinarily different ways, that we seem in general to have been improving on those ideas. And you touched on one of the themes as to why that might be happening, which is communication. I think everybody and every leader I talked to has said, you know what, we have really got to connect and engage with our people in very, very different ways. And we've got to put them front and center, and we've got to show that we care and we worry about their well-being. So those would be my immediate observations, which I think are really interesting and things for us to carry forwards as we think about a post-pandemic world.
Absolutely. Thank you, Peter. And then we've got Lord Mark Price, the founder of Workle and Engaging Business. He's focused on getting the world happy at work. And you might know his name from when he ran Waitrose. Happens to be a slightly employee ownership, apparently some sort of partnership. Anyway, he had time as a trade minister as well. He's passionate about helping organisations and individuals unlock workplace happiness. Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. Please welcome Mark Price. Now, Mark, you were part of the most famous employee-owned business for many years at the John Lewis Partnership. Happy times for you as an employee?
Yes, very happy. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. Yes, I had a very, very happy 3.5 decades with the John Lewis Partnership. And the unique thing about the organisation is that we all know that it's an employee-owned business. But the founder, Speed & Lewis, set out the first principle of the partnership being the happiness of the people that work there. And so what he resolved is that if my people are happy, they'll be more engaged, they'll give more, and I'll have a better business over the medium and the long term. So I spent 3.5 decades trying to work out what does it actually mean to be happy at work? What are the practical things that can happen? And just to build on Peter's point, which is well made, all the research that we've done through the COVID period have shown that actually people have been happier at work. And as Peter said, people feel that information is shared far more. They feel more entrusted and empowered because they've had to be. They feel that the organisation has cared more for their well-being. So scores on all of those things have gone up. They actually feel they have a better relationship with their line manager now than they had before. So lots of positives have come from it. And there's only 2 areas really where people are saying their circumstances are less good than they were at work. One is the sociable aspect of work. I mixing with people every day. And the other is about career development. It's that sort of either informal or formal management of people's careers that they feel they're missing out on. But in all other respects, people are consistently scoring higher now than they were pre-COVID by quite a big measure.
That is staggering to hear, actually. Yeah, it's fascinating that you're able to capture that at the moment. And I'd love to hear what it's like when people go back. Go back to the workplace. Of course, so many people are already in the workplace by no choice. They haven't got a choice to work from home. So, but generally speaking, I'd love to see how those issues have been carried forward if they're able to. And then we have Camila Neave. Camila, thank you for stepping in. Just yesterday, she got a call from the EOA to say that the panelists that we had booked had unfortunately got suspected COVID. So Camila, brilliant to have you. Camila is head of HR at Make Architects, and that has offices in London, Hong Kong and Sydney. An employee-owned business of 150 people. Camilla's been at Make since 2013. And Peter, you'll be pleased to hear this. She's a member of the CIPD. She's got over 15 years experience with HR, predominantly within the construction industry. And Camila, what sort of architecture does Make get involved in? I saw on your website that technology and innovation was really, really out there for you, really high on your agenda.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of the type of architecture, anything commercial really. So offices, which is obviously an interesting subject going forward. Retail, laboratories, hotels, residential, transport, anything really. And in terms of innovation and technology, I mean, absolutely. The days of architects being, stuck with their pencil and paper and a drawing board are gone. Although we do still encourage hand drawing, but it is all about the technology now. And people want more from their buildings. There's a lot around sustainability, but the whole life cycle of the building and how that can be sustainable. And that means, people need to be really engaged with what they're doing. They need to research it. And they need to be empowered to try different things because, in a world of innovation, it is about trial and error. So that is a major part of it, which I think being EO helps us to do that and therefore set us apart in a very competitive market.
Interestingly, Make is one of the very few, I'd say, organisations that was employee owned from day one. There was no major transition to happen. The founder had that in his heart, didn't he, when he set up?
He did, and it wasn't an easy path for him either. So his vision was to set something up where, you know, the person at the top didn't get all the money, all the reward for everything that everyone else was doing. It is quite common for architects to set up under their name, for example, and he just did not want that. He wanted something that would leave a legacy, and he thought long and hard about it. And he came up with Make because he actually wants to make and build buildings, and that was behind that. But he really wanted to see a meritocracy where people could, from all levels, would have an opportunity to give their views. We have no job titles at Make, so we have no hierarchy, which sounds like it could be quite chaotic, but it's not. We do have a structure. We are a partnership, so we do have a board of directors, but it leaves it very open. It has its pros and cons, but the pros definitely outweigh the cons, which is fabulous. And yes, I've definitely not worked anywhere else like it. In a positive way.
We'll hear more about your happiness in a minute.
Can I ask Camila a question?
Go ahead. It's a panel and anything goes, frankly, today.
Camila, would you say that architecture as a sector tends to be not that happy and engaged, and therefore being an EO business makes a real difference in that sector?
That's a very interesting question, and one that probably doesn't have a straight answer. I mean, it's a vocation, really. So I think everybody within it is passionate about what they're doing, for sure. But are they happy in the practice that they're at, I think, is the difference between practices. And there are so many horror stories. You know, part of the journey that our founding directors had were, you know, 24-hour working, crazy hours, not being treated well, your work being criticised, which starts at university. It's a whole subject I could get onto, because they have crits, and that's the whole purpose of it. So I think the difference with practices is what sets it apart. And people, they're so passionate about what they're doing, you have to physically tell them to stop working a lot of the time. But to be able to do that in an environment where they feel valued, I think is what really sets the different practices apart.
So in the research we did, we found that architecture is in the lowest 3 ranking of sectors for happiness at work. So I was really struck when you were talking about your founder, whether taking the approach he does is going to give you a real competitive advantage. Yeah,
it will do. And I'm sure that one of the other driving factors is, as an industry, it's one of the lowest paid. You have to study for, you know, 7 years, yet some of the salaries when you kind of come out, especially compared to other industries, you know, you have to do equivalent type study, is particularly low as well, which is a whole nother subject as well.
Okay, so let's find out some general ideas about what good work is, or what an individual should be feeling at work, and what sort of pillars there are to attend to if you are in business generally, or if you're in EO business. I'm sure a lot of these things will be familiar to you. Peter, let's start with you. What is your definition of good work? Because the CIPD has the Good Work Index 2020, doesn't it? So I'm guessing you might have some ideas there.
Yeah, the idea of good work or quality jobs has been researched in academia for many years, and it's been talked about in different contexts and organizations for many years, but it's gained a real resonance today. And the reason is because of all of the things that we now recognize are the things that most motivate us, that are most important to our well-being. And there are 8 defined attributes that we've found. We've worked with places like Warwick Business School and Matthew Taylor at the RSA, who led the work on modern working practices, which called out this idea, actually, when you think about the future of work, let's anchor it around these principles of good work. So there are things like, am I paid fairly? And it's important to emphasize fairly. It's not that we all need to be paid gazillions, but am I paid fairly? Do I understand my terms and conditions and my rights, which might sound fairly simple, but it's a distressing fact that many people in work do not understand their basic rights. Is the job using my skills effectively? It's very, very important, particularly somewhere like Camilla's business, where people are committed so much to developing those skills, are they actually using those skills? Can I see progression? And have I got a voice, which is really, really important in the context we're talking now? And finally, perhaps one of the most important things, is it actually good for me? Is it good for my well-being? In all the work we've done as we've surveyed these different attributes of work, we've asked people, what is the most important thing to you in terms of your loyalty, your productivity, and everything else? And it's really interesting and in some ways reassuring, because it humanizes the whole debate about work, that actually it's your well-being. Is this job making me feel good? Is it helping me in my mental well-being and also my physical? And how do those all interlink? And so what excites me about these agendas is it reinforces the idea of the human at work, the person at work. And all these debates about good work, they're really fundamentally centered on that idea. Because if I look after the person and I'm motivating them, connecting them, giving them voice, looking after their well-being, then they will be productive and they will be loyal. But they don't come for free. And we have to really work in our organizations to design the work effectively, particularly in a very fast changing world with technology and all these other things, which I think there's been too much evidence of us not always designing jobs around technology that get the best out of people. And I think that's a very important agenda for us all looking ahead.
I've got a burning question for you, but I do want to ask Mark for his definition. Thank you, Peter. I do want to ask for Mark for how you measure happiness. So you've got similar ideas, haven't you? Reward and recognition, information sharing, empowerment, well-being, purpose, job satisfaction. Not so different to what Peter's just described. You go about measuring that on a regular basis, don't you? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, yes, of course. Well, it all flows from the time I spent in the John Lewis Partnership. And one of the things that became clear to me very quickly is that paying a bonus at the beginning of March wasn't, I thought, enough, and most people think enough, to regain people's enthusiasm and engagement throughout the entire year. So you have to think about, what does it mean to be an owner? If you own something, you care more about it. But what does ownership mean? So putting shares into trust for the employees or giving them a share option scheme is just part of what you need to do. As Peter said, being paid fairly is very important, being recognized when you do something well. If you're the owner of a business, you have all the information you need about that business and about how to do your job. You're trusted to make decisions and your views are listened to, so you're empowered. You care for your own well-being, mental and physical, as Peter said, and financial as well. You feel that you're doing something worthwhile, you're creating jobs, you're creating value, and of course you're developing your career. So if you think about, if I am an owner of a business, what does it feel like? Then employee ownership should be about replicating all of those things. So it's not just holding shares in trust or holding a share scheme. So what I tried to do when I left the partnership is to build a platform to measure those things. So if you're an EO business, you should be doing these things anyway. But if you're a good business, you should want to do these things. You should want to measure and improve those attributes so that people feel like owners. They care more for the business because of the input they have and the responsibilities they hold. So for all those reasons, we built the platform, we measure those things, and that's why I can tell you that people are happier now than they were pre-COVID.
Why is it then, and Camilla, maybe you could answer this because you've seen other practices within your sector and you've worked around a lot. You haven't just worked for Make since it was founded and all the rest of it. And all three of you can answer this, maybe, hopefully. Why aren't more employers looking at this and putting it front and center of how they operate and baking it into their structure? Because, you know, there are so many jobs where this is not the case. And, you know, you can think about, you know, drivers and factory workers and all that, or they're not quite happy at work or they're not paid well enough. But actually, in professional work, people are crying in toilets quite often in law firms, you know, that kind of thing. It's not pleasant. We've all seen it. We've all heard about it. Why aren't more employers getting behind this and realizing the benefits if they're so great? Camilla, what do you reckon?
I mean, my first kind of thought there is, I think more and more employers are looking at it, which is great. it's about them knowing it's an option. So, I mean, when we were founded back in 2014, appreciate that was a while ago, the founding directors, it took them months to come up with this model. And actually, it was only when they finally found a solicitor who understood the John Lewis model, because everybody that they went to, they said, "You're mad. Why do you want to give up everything?" Because the way that we're structured is we're 100% employee owned. There are 2 shares that are worth £1 each. So we don't have shares. We basically share all the profit we make between us equally as a percentage of our salary. So it's really unheard of. But when we talk to people about it, that's when I think people really start to see the benefits of it. My cynical side says, you know, you really need to be up for kind of giving away some control, potentially giving away some of the financial benefits of, you know, being the top dog or whatever it may be. And I think that's hard for people. And I think it's hard to transition when employers or companies have been working a certain way for so long. But I would like to think there is definitely more appetite for it now. And I think, you know, we can see that with the numbers of companies that are growing into EO companies now.
Okay, don't forget, audience members, you can ask questions as well. We've got a bit of a workaround to solve the tech problem, which is to email Anne with an E, ANNE, .richardson@employeeassociation.co.uk. She's taking your questions and then sending them to me. So I'd love to hear what you've got to say, because Peter and Mark, I mean, you must come across employers all the time who no one's going to say, "No, we want unhappy workers." They must go along with this and go, yeah, great idea, yeah. But actually, for some reason, whatever those reasons are, they can't move forward on it. What are you hearing from the people you deal with?
I mean, I suppose both Mark and I, in due deference to each other, go back a little way in terms of our business experience. And, you know, I've long observed, if you look at the latter decades of the last century, that we were so much in a sort of command and control world for the most part. People being treated as assets. We even use that language. I mean, if we think about our profession, which is, you know, beginning to change its name in many contexts, but still human resources or human capital, all those sorts of ideas. And I do think we lived through a long period of time when we forgot things. I mean, as Mark talked about Ben Lewis and his background, I mean, I often refer to the history of the CIPD itself, and its forebears were 100 years ago, and they were what was known as the Welfare Workers Association, working in a similar types of business, Roundtrees, Cadbury's, Lever Brothers, and they still hold those principles true. That, as I always say, welfare workers did what it said on the tin. They looked after the welfare of the workers. And we seem to have entered a period in the latter part of the last couple of decades, the last century, where it became more about command and control. It became more about making money, the bottom line, efficiency, process re-engineering, all this stuff. You think, yeah, and where was the human in all of that? Now, that's not universal, of course. There are many businesses who've always held these principles to be true. But I would echo what Camila said. I absolutely do believe there's been a lot of shift in recent years. I think there's no doubt in my mind that the pandemic, and as we've already observed, has taught us a lot of things and will be a real catalyst for a different, you know, way of thinking about people in organizations and these corporate cultures, which we can all see the benefits of. This is not just being nice to people. I mean, I've heard business leaders say in the past, only half joking, I don't pay people to be happy, I pay them to work hard, right? Only half joking. So now we're in a different paradigm. It says, yes, but having happy and engaged workers who are well not only increases their productivity, it certainly increases their loyalty and the retention in the organization. And I was very privileged to be on the commission 18 months or so ago with Deb Oxley and Baroness Sharon Bowles, looking at lots of EO, you know, employee-owned businesses. And exactly as Camila said, at the very heart of the idea of employee ownership is that we're in a shared endeavor. We have a shared purpose. We have a shared destiny. And that the owners of the business, if it's all of us, all need to look after each other. So it became obvious that with EO, you know, employee-owned businesses, these principles were much more embedded in the ways those organizations thought. So as I said, I think in many ways, we have been going through a lot of shift in what businesses regard as important, what leaders regard as important, what regulators and investors regard as important as well. And I think this pandemic will be a real catalyst, and people will see the benefits of things like employee ownership models, as well as of really embedding this culture within organizations.
Well, we've only met, or earlier met one EO business so far, but I know that we've got a lot of stories over the next 2 days to come out about the bottom line being boosted by these tenets, these pillars of happiness or well-being at work. Camilla, I think you're going to explain in a little while. But Mark, just finally to you, why aren't businesses getting their arms around this? What's the problem? What's the barrier to entry there?
Well, I would say they increasingly are. If you're a PLC, it's obviously very difficult to convert yourself into an EO business. But I think that the growth of EO over the last decade has shown that more people are thinking in this way, particularly founders of...
Maybe not EO per se, but just generally looking after employees and putting them first. People first, profit second, third, something like that.
Yeah, well, if you look at somebody like Richard Branson, he's always said, my people come first and then my customers get great service. As Peter said, there's lots of academic evidence now that says the most engaged, the happiest workforces are more productive, have lower staff turnover, have higher productivity. So there is academic evidence if you want to go and look for it. But I think, as Peter was saying, there have been societal changes that I think are creating a different environment for people to think differently about the workforce. You've had gender pay being a huge issue. And that means that you've got to be more transparent around equality. We've had Black Lives Matters this summer. So the whole thought about diversity and inclusion and fairness there. We've obviously had COVID, which we're living through, and putting people at the top of the agenda, their welfare, how do you look after them at work? We're also seeing a millennial generation who are far more committed to wanting to work in companies where they are treated well and there is a sense of purpose. So I would agree with Peter. From when I started in business in the early 80s, and I went to business schools and I was told the supreme purpose of a chief executive is maximizing shareholder value, that's now changed. It is more now about a balanced scorecard. So in Engaging Business, we now work with over 100 companies measuring workplace happiness, engagement, and looking to improve it, because they can see all of these benefits. There are hard benefits in terms of profit, but there are much softer benefits as well. And I'm optimistic. I think there is a growing awareness of what Peter's done great work at CIPD in this whole agenda, and others have too. And I do think that the dial is shifting, and I think COVID is moving it very dramatically now.
Camilla, you spoke to me earlier about Make, and tell me a little bit about it. It sounds like some of the things that you were telling me about just smack happiness at work, smack of happiness at work, and being trusted, for example. So you coming on this panel this afternoon as the HR director, HR manager at Make, you could make that decision yourself. You didn't have to go up to some department to find out if it was okay and then get drilled on key messages and then corporate speak and then turn out the other end. And setting up D&I, you know the ones. Setting up the D&I got going and having conversations about Black Lives Matter and moving things forward on that easily without any friction. Just explain a little bit more about those sort of things that are happening at Make.
Sure. So, I mean, and this is what sets it apart for me, for my own personal development. So, I'm trusted to look after my area, and the directors and the makers, as we call everybody at Make, are expecting me to keep on top of things in my world and to tell them what needs to be done. I don't have anybody coming to me to say, oh, I really think we should do have a diversity group or anything like that. It's up to me to push my HR agenda forward in line with the business. And just to give those examples, so obviously Black Lives Matter, as you said, Mark, happened this summer, and it has propelled things in a very positive way, I think, for everybody to start looking at it. And I'm now part of an architectural race forum, which is something else that I don't have to ask permission to do. It was set up, I just join it, and I let people know that this is happening. I sent an email out to the company to say, who's up for kind of joining me and discussing some of these matters. We've got a group of us that do that. I'm working with some external friends of Make who have worked with us in the past to look really closely at what it means to be inclusive at Make. We're going to take a real look at ourselves talk to people independently. It won't be me asking people, it will be an independent person. We're obviously hoping and confident that there won't be any awful stories that come out, but you never know. So we're preparing ourselves for that. And the whole point of that is it's the empowerment. I know I can do that. I know I'm trusted to do that. I've got people there who I can bounce ideas off, who will support me. And it's the same across everything. So our branding, our strapline is imagine more, and that's not just for clients to imagine more for what they want to get out of using our service. It's for us to do that. And there are so many examples that we have. A few years ago, someone said, we should have an exhibition of everything that we as makers do outside of work, because as a whole, we're very, very creative. So we did. We've got great space. So we had a Makers Create exhibition on the kind of walkway down into our building. We invited our family, our friends, clients to come and have a look, and it was amazing. You had painting, sculpture, all sorts of things. So, it's not just about what we can do for our clients, it's about making sure that we're kind of gathered together as well, and we're really appreciating what we can do as individuals. Gosh, there are so many examples. We've got specialisms. Our Make Neutral, which is about sustainability, is just flying at the moment. So I think the main thing is it's the empowerment and the trust.
I was going to say the one thing you touched on there was the empowerment and the trust. In fact, that your job as an HR manager is not to take orders about how to do the next thing that's HR-y. It's to keep your finger on the pulse and inform others around you, and then come up with a proposal idea for how that might change, and then go forward with it. That sounds fantastically empowering to me.
Yes, and it's the same across the board, and that's what we encourage from everybody. So it's for everything. It's I read this about a new material or a new piece of research into how this piece of cladding can work, for example. It's just go out there, do what you can, and bring it back. It's kind of, if Nike didn't have it, I think our strapline would be just do it. As long as it's not going to cost a fortune and it fits in with all our values, then that is absolutely the message. Just get out there and do it. You are empowered.
Okay, so we've had lots of audience questions coming in. You'll be pleased to hear. So you don't have to limp on with mine anymore. I'm joking. Ann.Richardson is the email to send your question to if you're hearing anything from our panelists about good work and how to put employees and individuals at the heart of what you do. That's what we're discussing with Peter, Mark and Camilla. Ask us a question. I'll put it to the panel. Ann with an E. Richardson at employee ownership. You know how that goes. .co.uk, and then fire away. And we've had a great question, actually. Jeremy Gadd has messaged Anne, and then she's messaged me. It's wonderful, this new world. What are the differences that you've observed between businesses who engage employees and those who engage employee owners? Do you get your heads around that one? See, there's engaging staff, there's employee engagement. We're all trying to do that. And then there's employee engagement when they're owners. And do you have just an easier time of it when they're owners? Mark, I think you need to answer that, don't you, straight away?
Well, I think it's about the things I talked about earlier on. You can put shares in a trust, you can give share awards to individuals, and that's fine. And both of those could be described as share ownership in one form or another. But it's really how you think about engaging your individuals in feeling like owners, so they want to give more. And we've talked about the headings, but it is about making sure people are fairly paid and recognised, making sure that information is freely and openly shared, making sure that Camilla's great example, that people are trusted to get on and do their job, and that therefore they can get recognition for that. It is about really genuinely caring for the individual's welfare. My favourite quote is Theodore Roosevelt, who said, "Nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care." And I think that in employee-owned businesses, you should be able to demonstrate your care to a greater extent. It should be baked in the culture, that sense of purpose and then career development. So for me, the advantage of being an employee-owned business is that those things should be natural. All those things you should get if you are an owner. And in many ways, they're theoretically more difficult for a large PLC that's owned by outside shareholders. but those large PLCs can still do a good deal of that if they choose to.
Okay. Peter, do you see any differences between engaged employees and engaged employee owners?
Yes, I do, and I'd echo everything Mark just said, but I would add something else. I think it's a sort of shared sense of accountability, and one of the things that I really enjoyed hearing from many different sizes of organizations, including John Lewis, was this idea that if we all have some share and interest in the business, then we tend to get more involved in understanding what makes the business really work, because after all, it's a shared destiny, and that builds that stronger sense of accountability. Because I mean, certainly, you know, my experience with many business leaders, they say, well, the trouble is the organization don't get it, right? And now let's say they're not understanding how this business runs. And when I'm telling them we've got to cut costs, they're saying, oh, no, we haven't. We can carry on doing what we're doing. I mean, all of that sort of dynamic, which is so common in organizations. What I've really observed with employee-owned businesses is you've got that extra dimension of engagement, which is a sort of shared destiny idea, so that you're communicating with them all the time about where is the business, how's it operating, so how do your shares of the business actually look? And by doing that, all of the employees are gaining a greater sense of understanding of the business and what they can do individually to impact it, because that is a very important part of successful and effective businesses, that everybody understands their accountability and their role in helping to make the organization successful. And I think that is a very noticeable attribute of employee-owned businesses. It's not unique to them, but it is certainly very strongly represented, I think, through these business models.
Camilla, I can't imagine you having any sort of hand-wringing situation over employee engagement in the way that maybe other HR managers might in other organizations. Are you ticking the employee engagement box well enough, do you think? Is it easier?
It's definitely not. It's not easy, but I think some of the things that we have embedded in how we do things, just to follow on from what Peter was saying there around, it's the transparency. So, you know, the only financial information that is not fully available to anybody is everyone's salary. So everybody can see what's coming in and out of the business at any point in time. You know, it's all a live document that people can look at. If they need any information, if they don't understand it, there are people that are there sort of teaching, and we're encouraging people to do that. And I think the difference is when appropriate, and it's not always, is to ask rather than tell. And I think that is quite a difference between thinking about employees and thinking about employee owners. You know, if there's a problem or if there's an opportunity, you know, how can we go and do that? You're going to get, we've got a variety of people, as every business does, so you'll get a variety of answers, which is only going to, you know, be best for everybody. You know, we don't always get it right, but we strive to get it right. And when we don't, we're told that we don't, which is part of the learning and part of the amazing nature of it. So at least we can take that on board for next time. And I think that's the point, is, you know, we're never going to be perfect, but you've got to fail. In fact, it was at one of the EO conferences a couple of years ago. We normally send 10 people up. And one of the biggest messages they came back with is we've got to fail in order to then move forward with it. So we tried an employee forum. It didn't work for us for various reasons. So now we're trying something else. So, you know, it's about just being transparent to that as well and open about it.
And not expecting that everyone has a solid answer that this is how it's going to work. I'd like to put another question to you from our audience. Thank you for this one. Employees can see the share in the profits as a positive when the company is doing well, of course. But what about when the company's not doing so well? Maybe through cuts or COVID pandemic, perhaps, and maybe back in March, April, Camilla, there was a bit of a wobble going on with engagement. How do you get staff to buy into EO when the company is not doing so well? Although all the EO companies I've heard about are doing fantastically, I have to say.
Yeah, and I have to say that this year we have done as well, which has been amazing. But we haven't always, and we have had to make cuts over the years, and it's not easy. But again, because we're transparent about it, it's not been a surprise when it has happened. I think everybody's known that, you know, things haven't been going so well. we do try to put it out there, offer people who might be thinking about sabbaticals, etc., the opportunity to come forward if, you know, that might save on, you know, making it redundancies, etc. But it's not easy, and I think the key is the communication around it, treating people, the individuals who are going through the process fairly, and really kind of thinking about them as well, and the communication afterwards is very, very important. But again, you know, we haven't always got it right, and it's really difficult, and that's what we say. In the good times it's good, and in the bad times it's not so bad. That's all part of it. You've got to sign up for all of it. But you know, as long as people are understanding of that, and it helps that it's not ever a, oh my gosh, I didn't see that coming. You know, just have a look at the finances, which are, I can't overestimate how easy it is to see where we're at in terms of our finances. So it is something that normally people bring to our attention as well, to say, are we thinking about things?
And Mark, in the retail sector, things are incredibly challenging for any business, but EO businesses, how do you maintain any sort of level of happiness when maybe bonuses aren't being paid out, or you know, customers aren't able to come through the door? There's a huge amount of disruption and challenge there, isn't there?
Well, my experience over my 3.5 decades with the partnership, I left 5 years ago now, but it was actually in the tough times, there was that greater sense of shared purpose and that greater sense of engagement. I felt that there was more energy in the business to want to get through it and ideas to get out of it. So you kind of think that bonus is the be all and the end all, and it isn't really. It's, do I feel involved in this? Am I an owner? Are things being fairly shared with me? Am I able to affect the direction that we're moving in? Am I respected? There's lots of other things. So I always found that those tough times, actually, the partners, as they're called in the John Lewis Business Partnership, came to the fore. That there is one watch out, though, in difficult times, and we're seeing it in research at the moment. We do something called the Stickiness Index, and that sort of measures who are really happy in their job and they're never going to leave, who are really miserable in their job and they're going to go tomorrow, and a group in the middle. And what we've seen over COVID is that there are more people saying, I don't want to leave. It's gone up by about 10 percentage points. Far fewer people are saying, I'm going to walk out tomorrow, I hate this place. But you're seeing a big increase, a 30% increase in people in the middle who are saying, I'm just ambivalent about my job. I don't want to leave. It isn't a good time to go. I'm not really going to commit to the future. And I think the real trick is how businesses get the most out of that cohort right now. And we're seeing that about 45% of people are putting themselves in that box. So I think the real advantage that EO businesses have now is they should be better able to appeal to that group and have a smaller number than businesses that are not EA owned, where people are just hanging on in there because the alternatives don't look very palatable at the moment. I think that's a big issue for British business right now. We've got another index that's called Apostles and Anarchists, and we see the same there. This middle group now is growing, and it's people who are, I've got a job, I'm not going to rock the boat, but, you know, frankly, this job isn't rocking my boat.
And you end up with presenteeism, low productivity rates, I would have thought. Does EO help solve productivity, the productivity puzzle? You know, we've had low growth, slow growth in the UK, and, you know, even slower uptick in productivity we've never seen the likes of in the last 10 years. Peter, can EO help solve the productivity puzzle by engaging that lumpy middle who aren't particularly passionate about their work, but don't want to leave either?
Yes, it can, as we've all observed. I mean, engagement and productivity are very intimately linked, and if I'm more committed to my organisation, I'm more likely to go the extra mile. But of course, the debate about productivity is a very, very big one, and I'm not convinced we measure all the right things. We also have a very services and knowledge-driven economy in the UK, far greater proportion than many other of our equivalent nations in Europe, for example. I'm not sure we're measuring the right stuff. It's even questionable to some degree. When we do measure productivity, is it the thing that makes the difference to organizations anyway? Because, you know, I can show you charts that show that productivity growth has broken away some time ago from wages growth. And yet we keep hearing from governments and others that we've got to improve productivity in order to improve wages. So it's it's a very challenging, complex subject all by itself. But I think that the idea that in an organization that people will tend to give more, a bit more discretionary effort, engage more, connect with their colleagues, share innovation, ideas, contribute, all of which help to drive productivity in the wider sense. I think there's very little doubt that those ideas are all linked. And as we said, the EO, by and large, shows a higher level of engagement of organizations, which is positive in terms of productivity outcomes in the ways we just talked about.
Camilla, we've had a question in from Neil Smith. We've heard about the key pillars of a great workplace. Thank you. In terms of HR measurables, can we cite any examples outside employee satisfaction or attendance turnover data? Is it the discretionary extra work? Is it the ability to spend more time on certain projects or develop outside projects that would normally be off the side of the desk? How do you look at this? And does EO Business measure stuff quite so vehemently as maybe other businesses do?
Yeah, so I mean that's interesting. We don't really go in for measurables ourselves very much. You know, I know what our turnover stat is, but it doesn't really mean a great deal to us. What we're looking at is the conversations that we're having with people. So, you know, we're always doing that. We're always encouraging the project leaders to be talking to their team about things. And I think the main thing for us is all the anecdotal things. You know, all of the things that are going on outside of the main job, if you like. You know, that everyone's got, if I take just on the design side, you know, they've got their project they're working on, but actually what they're also producing is, you know, all this great work on all the thought leadership pieces that we do, and we do a lot in that area, which is all, you know, they have obviously time within the working day to do that, but it's extra, and it's stuff that really engages them because they're interested in it. And I think it's what we're told about. So, you know, I will hear it a lot that the debate about job titles, for example, when it's had, you know, lots of pros and cons to it, but definitely more pros. And what comes out of things is, you know, I always say, well, don't look for a job title because you're not going to get one. So think about what are you doing in your day-to-day job? What are your responsibilities? That's what you need to be looking at. And what I get told all the time is, do you know, you're right, because my mate isn't able to go to a client meeting, yet I've been sat in these client meetings for, you know, for the entire project, that kind of thing, which comes down to, we push people out there. You know, we don't have this hierarchy of, okay, you're a graduate, so you always stay in the office and that's that. You know, we encourage people to come to the meetings, take part in them. We give them pieces to present. And I think it's all those kind of things that you can't really measure, but you can definitely keep an eye on and keep talking to people and understanding them. That is what drives that forward for us.
Does it freak people out when they join your firm if they've come from another environment? Were you a bit freaked out by EO to begin with? It sounds too good to be true.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie, I was, and especially the hierarchy piece, because I was like, so who are all the managers? And I was like, we don't use that word. I was like, oh gosh, this is going to take some time. But absolutely, it was, and the biggest thing that I noticed almost straight away was, from my HR point of view, was that everything with trust was taken as presumed. You didn't have to work there for 6 months, 1 year to earn it. You know, if I said I needed to be doing something else outside work, for example, whatever it may be, they'd be like, that's fine, you just make up the hours. You know, it's your job, you know what you need to do, get it done how you need to do it. You know, there isn't this, in my role previously, it was, you know, oh, so-and-so's been off for 2 days, what's going on? You know, oh, I think they're skiving type thing. That's not the presumption at all. It's, you know, are they okay? Can we support them? What's going on? You know, if it's something more serious. And it's quite hard to explain that, but it was a real eye-opener for me, and I just felt like, wow, this is a company I could really see myself staying at, hence why I've been there nearly 8 years.
Okay, we've got a couple of minutes, so final question. Sorry, Peter, you wanted to just dive in on that just briefly, yeah? Yeah,
just very briefly. I love these kind of stories, Camilla, these sort of sometimes holocracies, democracies. And they can work, but they don't work in every circumstance. And I know you would say that as well. I mean, it is important that we all understand what our culture is, what is best fit, because I think an awful lot of business practice in previous decades and years it was very driven by a notion of best practice. Somewhere out there is a perfect model, and we just replicate that, and we can all do the same thing. And I remember having lots of debates in the early noughties and things like that about Google. Everybody wanted to be like Google. I said, you're not like Google, you run a mining company, so, or whatever, you know. So it isn't, but there are many messages that we can take forward, no matter what the nature of our business, about giving people voice, giving, you know, making them feel that they are empowered, that they have a say in what is going on. And again, just to point back to the research, there's many decades of research that show those ideas are so central to the idea of engagement. And if any of you people listening are interested in that research, there's a very, very good book written by a guy called Dan Pink called Drive, or the Surprising Truth About What Motivates Us. And it's a somewhat ironic title because we've actually known for decades, we just haven't implemented it. And it's three things. It's purpose, which we talked about quite a lot. It is autonomy, which is what Camilla is talking about, give people freedom and choice in what they do and so forth, and a say in what they do. And it's mastery, which is the idea that I want to improve. And part of your job as my manager or my organization is to give me the resources to do the best job I can. And those, if we stick to principles like that, then, you know, it's a good place to start for sure.
Okay, very, very quick poser for you. And maybe this is a yes, no answer with maybe a sentence, because probably all we've got time for, to be honest. But this is a fascinating question. And thank you for all your questions, by the way. Wealth inequality amongst individuals has been revealed during COVID. It was there always, but very much revealed. Can the sharing of success through ownership really help this? And could EO businesses please show the PLC world how to do this? And someone's mentioned in another question, maybe the public sector too. Any chance that we could roll out the theories of EO and get people thinking along these lines about helping individuals be happy? Yes, no, Mark Price. Maybe say a bit more.
Yes, so I think the whole principle of EO is that you share more fairly. You share everything more fairly. You share the profits that you generate, you share decision making, you share information. So yes, is the simple answer to your question.
Good. Go forth and do that. Peter Cheese.
Absolutely, and I think it is actually one of the bigger questions that is beginning to confront us, this recognition of inequality and fairness and balance. And there's no doubt that EO models do help to do that, and therefore the question is right. Yes, PLC can learn from these things. And yes, I believe it's going to be one of the central driving issues for what is responsible business in the future. And EO can hold its head up high in that regard. But there's a whole field called the economics of inequality. And you read people like Thomas Piketty, some of these rock star economists, as they're now called, they're calling this stuff out. And sadly, yes, I agree with the questioner as well, that the pandemic is illustrating more of those cracks. So even more reason to take forward some of the principles that we're talking about within the EO world.
And Camilla, final quick word from you if you can.
Absolutely. I would just add, yes, absolutely, and I think it's part of the duty of every EO company out there to push it as well in all the external forms. And you know, we're always open, and I know Deb and the team come to us to put us in touch with other companies who are thinking about transitioning and what it's like, and you know, we give honest feedback about it. And I think if we all do that, we're being asked about it. So what, you know, we can all help with actually making businesses do that.
Okay, that's great to hear, actually. Very, very interesting. Thank you all so much for your contribution. It's been a fascinating conversation and very positive and forward thinking. I love that. It's given me a lot of hope, actually, because I did sort of arrive going, oh, the world just isn't right. But thank you. You've changed my mind. Thank you very much to Peter Cheese from the CIPD, Mark Price of Workle, and Camilla Neave from Make Architects. And thank you, audience, for emailing Anne Richardson at, you know the one. And it was in the panel all along. You could have just copied and pasted it. Thank you for your great questions. We had loads of great questions. We've got another lineup of panelists at the same time tomorrow, by the way, to discuss what businesses can do to be a force for good, not just for their employees, but for the wider world, with representatives from the Federation for Small Business, the Good Business Charter, and employee-owned business TensCare to help us manage the pain of it all. Deb Oxley is here with a few highlights from the day. Hello, Deb.
Hi, Penny. How are you?
I'm very well. Sorry about
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
Yes, I'm great. I don't know if you can hear me at all. But anyway, so what's been your highlight? What's been your highlight?
Wow. Well, I think I've just been looking at the numbers. We've had 950 people join us across the 6 sessions today. So that's definitely a highlight. I think you said at the beginning it's our biggest ever event, and it is. It's not just our biggest event. I think it's the biggest event about employee ownership in the UK ever. So that's been a huge highlight. And to think we can do all of this remotely as well is amazing. Obviously, the generosity of everybody who have contributed to the sessions. You just had a brilliant panel discussion, but you had Riverford in this morning. We've had panelists today. So yeah, generosity. I think, gosh, there's so many. Am I allowed to just say a few? Will you give me a few minutes? My session is
you're fine to do what you like.
The session this morning with Riverford, I think what I took out of that is, I think Guy said this really clearly, businesses are about people and don't ever forget that. So he was adamant that, you put your people first and the results will follow, and also made a great call out. He said, businesses are capable of more noble behaviour, and I thought that was fantastic, in the middle of quite a few profanities, but that's fine. I think the Explorer session with Ardman was great as well. We had some real strong lessons there for people who are exploring employee ownership, particularly for the founders. Work out what it is you want to achieve at the outset, and what matters to you most, and hold on to that throughout the process, and that creative passion and commercial success are compatible. This isn't just about giving businesses away, and it is, it's very much an economic model that can support thriving, sustainable businesses. And I think we had a good pointer there as well, which is when you implement employee ownership, make sure you're clear about roles and responsibilities between the trust and the board and the employees, which it really is a valuable lesson. The session with Union Industries, I don't know if you caught that, Penny, but this was the Good EO session. That was amazing. They did a fantastic video. There was a rather loud shirt from Leeds, which Andrew Lane wore, which got quite a few comments. But they were brilliant because they were talking about engagement, and they were talking about the engagement started pre-transition. But then they also talked about some tools, some real creative tools that they've created themselves for the engagement journey. Something called the Grapevine, something called a Quick Look. They updated the council members, they were updating directors. And then best of all, although it was a sad story, their engagement was really tested when they had a dreadful fire at the factory. And they were very candid about sharing the challenges that brought. So I've been really impressed by the stories. I thought the panel session you just had was brilliant. That I think Peter's comment about employee ownership, not just creating shared purpose, but shared destiny. And from that destiny, shared accountability. I've never thought about it like that, but I thought that was really insightful. And also Mark's point about the link between ownership and happiness. Again, something that I've not spent an awful lot of time thinking about, but was really clearly, there's a link there. And Camila, of course, was really focused on the fact that she's trusted. So that was all so powerful and so positive. We've been learning today, so we've had a few technical hitches. So I want to say sorry to one of our really important members, Baxendale, because some of the slides on their video didn't show properly, but we are going to put those on live on the site tomorrow. And of course, we've had this little technical hitch with the Q&A and the chat. But what I've also learned is teamwork makes the dream work. And actually, it's all worked fine because we've got lots of contingency. So I've had a great day. Can't believe it's only one day in now. We've got another 2 days to go, so I'm really looking forward to it.
We have, and we've got a great lineup tomorrow as well, Deb. The interview tomorrow with a company, an EO company from West Wales called ABBA Instruments, nothing to do with music, but a fascinating business, and one that's absolutely smashing it out the park as well with figures. Not that EO businesses really dwell on that. And it kind of underlines what Guy was saying this morning about, you nurture a good employee ownership culture and the good results are likely to follow. So I think, as that question in the panel came up, can we teach the PLC world this? Can we teach public sector this? Can we? Yes, I think EO is the answer, isn't it, to a lot of things? But thank you very much. I'll wrap up today, but you're going to be over in a Zoom room, aren't you, to mop up any major questions that people have, or little, daft stuff that you think, oh, I'm just curious about that. Deb, you're going to be there with Ollie, aren't you? Two of you.
And Jeremy and Robert, our headline sponsors, yeah. And of course, if anybody can't stay around for that, but they want to find out more, then by all means contact us through the Employee Ownership Association website. And particularly if you're exploring and this has been your first foray into employee ownership, if you're thinking, actually, this is something that I'd really like to find out more about, then get in touch with us. But by all means, join us in the room in a few minutes.
Okay, thanks very much, Deb. We're back tomorrow at 9:15 in the morning with another opening keynote and plenty of sessions through the day to learn from, and again, another panel discussion. So I hope you've had a cracking day. I know I have. Have a great evening. I'll see you soon.